And hopefully if they join, they'll join in a little bit.
Okay. So
I call to order the City of West Sacramento regular meeting of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission for December 2nd, 2020. Madam Clerk, can you please call the commission to order?
certainly. Commissioner Parker?
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Love?
Present.
Commissioner Zimmer?
Here.
Commissioner Lichtenstein?
Here.
Vice Chair Paul Hamus?
Here.
Chair Hirsch?
Here.
So 6 present and 2 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N2920, members of the Transportation, Mobility, and Infrastructure Commission and staff will participate in this meeting via a teleconference. To reduce the spread of COVID-19, members of the public are asked to watch the meeting live stream or via Wave Cable Channel 20 and to submit comments in writing by 5 p.m. on November 2nd, 2020. To submit a comment in writing, please email Jennifer SC at cityofwestsacramento.org and write public comment in the subject line. In the body of the email, include the item number and/or title of the item, as well as your comments. All comments received by 5 p.m. will be provided to the TMI Commission and posted on the website. The comments submitted shall then become part of the record of the meeting. With that said, getting the meeting underway, item 1A on the agenda today, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the Commission. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
There are no public matters on the agenda.
In that case, item 1B, Commissioner Communications. Commissioners, any communications at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the consent agenda, which tonight has 2 items on it. Does any commissioner wish to pull an item off of the consent agenda? And seeing none, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Yes, I offer a motion.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Zimmer and a second by Commissioner Parker. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Lichtenstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Zimmer?
Here. Aye.
Commissioner Love?
Aye.
Commissioner Parker?
Aye.
Chair Hirsch?
Aye.
Vice Chair Paul Hamus?
Aye.
That's 6 ayes and 2 absent for Commissioner Wetzel and Chrisman Kaufman. Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to the regular agenda is item 4, construction update on the West Capitol Avenue Safety Enhancement and Road Rehabilitation Project. And staff, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hirsch and commissioners. I'm going to request remote control so I can run the PowerPoint presentation.
Should have it now.
I think there's a little lag, but there we go. Perfect. Great. Well, good evening, Chair Hirsch and commissioners. Thank you for joining us this evening, Monday evening. My name is Ryan Tevis, and I'm an assistant engineer with the Capital Projects and Transportation Department. Also, I'm the construction project manager for the West Capitol Avenue Safety Enhancement and Road Rehabilitation Project. Let's get started. As you can see by the map, highlighted in purple, to the west at the Yolo Causeway bike path, next to the Interstate 80, the project stretches east to Jefferson Boulevard, and there is a segment that runs south to Park Boulevard just beyond the US 50. To go over the topics for tonight's discussion, we're going to discuss the project funding, the schedule, scope of improvements, progress to date, and upcoming milestones for the project. This project has been a tremendous accomplishment for the city and has been made part through our partnership and help with SACOG and Caltrans. This project has grant funding in the amount of $10.2 million with combined grant funds from the Regional Surface Transportation Program, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, as well as the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant. Also, the city has provided funding from the Water Enterprise Fund in the amount of $3.4 million and from other funding sources such as the traffic impact fee and various measures in the amount of $2.9 million. The project schedule for this project began in the fall of 2016 when city staff applied for grant funding for the design and construction of the project. Since the project was awarded the grant for progress, we have conducted a series of community engagement and outreach, as well as sought design guidance from Commission and Council. The information received has been helpful to identify that safety was a key topic that was to be addressed for the corridor. Design was completed in September of 2019, and the project was put out to bid beginning in January of 2020. Bids were opened for construction in March of 2020 and was taken to council for award in May of 2020. The project started construction in July of 2020, and it is anticipated or expected completion of construction in November of 2021. As you can see in the figure below, there were several steps during the design process to get us to construction, which included completing traffic studies, getting through environmental clearance, hosting and holding stakeholder focus groups, as well as community outreach, which proceeded with or progressed to the final design and bidding, and where we are now with construction. The project goal of this project is to improve safety and mobility for all users along the West Capitol Corridor. This was a key topic discussed in many of the community outreach and feedback from the community and from the public. The types of safety has been targeted for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles, and the types of improvements include utilities, road resurfacing, and safety enhancements. It should be noted that utility improvements were included because since we're completing road rehabilitation, by completing utility improvements later would cause disruption and would ruin the work that was completed for the road resurfacing. So by completing utilities now, it allows us or prevents us from having to go back later to do utility improvements. Types of utility improvements include water, electrical and telecommunications. And so by completing the water utility installation, fire hydrants, water services, valves, and other appurtenances are being installed. The water utilities are consistent with the city's 2015 master plan to provide fire flow and as well as capacity to the western end, as well as a segment between Westacre and Jefferson and Westacre on West Capitol. The electrical and telecommunications or fiber optics includes installing street lighting and electrical conduits, and fiber optics, which is will service the city's corporation yard, which is currently under construction, as well as traffic signal improvements at 6 intersections. There will be a combined total of 125 streetlights installed. There's around 31,000 linear feet of fiber optics and electrical conduits, and over a mile of water utilities being installed as part of the project. Utility completion is anticipated to be complete at in the late winter and early spring of 2021. As you can see in the pictures, progress of the construction, installing water mains, fiber optics, and a streetlight foundation. Not going to the next. Part of the project includes road resurfacing through various pavement and road rehabilitation techniques such as grind and overlay, full depth dig out, slurry sealing, rubberized pavement, sidewalk, driveway, curb and gutter, and ADA ramps. The design team identified areas that the road needed to be maintained compared to being rehabilitated. By grinding and overlaying, the city is providing a maintenance to a road surface that has not quite reached the area of rehabilitation in which a full depth dig out addresses. By completing full depth dig out, the pavement base layer is actually reconstructed from the bottom up, providing rehabilitating the pavement to better standards or to better condition. Slurry sealing provides a clean pavement surface in order to provide striping as well as fill in cracks and minor defects. The rubberized pavement portion of the project utilizes a green kind of sustainable technique or product for road rehabilitation by utilizing recycled tires. And so part of the rubberized pavement is that the city staff is looking to acquire a grant or apply for grant funding from Cal Recycle to help fund a portion of the project utilizing this sustainable alternative to conventional AC or asphalt concrete. The sidewalk, driveway, and curb and gutter and ADA ramps includes over a mile of sidewalk gap closure in which a portion of the sidewalk from Northport to Garnett will be completed, and that will provide a consistent and continuous accessibility for pedestrians along the entire south side of West Capitol Avenue. Over 38 driveways have been included for improvements on the West Capitol project. In addition, or lastly, nearly 40 ADA ramps are going to be rehabilitated or reconstructed as part of the project. As you can see in the pictures, some of the pavement deterioration, curb and gutters, and sidewalks that are scheduled for repairs. And then down at the bottom is a typical cross-section that's used for construction and design. Next up is the safety enhancements. So for this project, we have going to be completing bike lanes along the entire corridor from Jefferson to the Yolo Causeway Bike Trail. In addition, there will be lane configuration and optimization. And with the bike lanes, green bike lane striping will be provided in conflict zones. Buffered bike lanes will be provided, and mid-block crossings will be enhanced. Currently existing mid-blocks will be enhanced as part of the project. So for the lane configuration and optimization, a traffic study concluded that the additional traffic lanes on West Capitol Avenue could be reduced in order to help provide additional safety or enhanced with an emphasis on safety by reducing traffic speeds and eliminating some of the additional roadway that drivers used that could be that's in excess of what's needed. For the bike lane striping in conflict zones, the design team identified over 50 conflicts with driveways and intersections. And so, as you can see in the photo on the bottom left, a kind of a hatched green bike lane striping will be provided at these conflict zones, which will increase visibility and alert drivers that there is an upcoming, that they're going to be entering into the bike lane. The buffered bike lanes at select locations is going to be anywhere from 2 feet to 6 feet in width, and will allow bikers and provide them with more comfortability and more separation from the adjacent traffic, and providing additional safety for bicyclists. And as I mentioned, the mid-block crossings, which are being enhanced, are at the following locations on the next slide. The Yolo Causeway Bike Trail at Pine Avenue, Glide Avenue, Pecan Street, Walnut Street, and Sycamore Avenue. These are all existing mid-block crossings that are not up to current standards or could be improved or enhanced to increase safety for pedestrians as well as bicyclists, and to alert drivers of upcoming crosswalk. In order to do so, the improvements that have been chosen include rectangular rapid flashing beacons, pedestrian lighting, refuge islands, signs and striping, and as mentioned before, sidewalk gap closures. As you can see in the picture at the top, rectangular rapid flashing beacons allow pedestrians to provide indication to oncoming traffic that they're going to be crossing the street. Pedestrian lighting will be installed at each of these mid-block crossings, but as well as along the entire corridor. A total of 125 streetlights are planned for construction on the project. Refuge islands will be installed, or currently are installed, but will be enhanced to provide better accessibility for pedestrians, for ADA accessibility, and will be at the midpoint of the crosswalk to travel between traffic. Advanced warning signs will be installed to alert drivers of an upcoming crosswalk, and crosswalk striping will be enhanced to provide more visibility and to provide a more enhanced surface for pedestrians to cross. Additional safety enhancements include the traffic signal upgrades at the following intersections at Harbor, Poplar Avenue, West Acre Road, Jefferson Boulevard, Merkley Avenue, and Park Boulevard. Improvements have been selective as far as the extent of what's going to be improved. However, each of the traffic signals at these intersections will have video detection systems installed, which, as you can see in the figure, the picture to the top right, allows for the detection system to actually identify when vehicles are queuing at the traffic signal, thus by helping to reduce the traffic and congestion. Traffic signal poles and heads are actually the ones that have been selected. And so the traffic signal poles will be replaced or installed with new poles and signal heads to provide a better visibility for vehicles in the daytime and to upgrade to current standards, as some of them have started to become outdated and need replacement. Pedestrian push buttons and indicators will be installed at all of the intersections and come with METCD standards and indicators in order to meet the current standards that are required for pedestrian accessibility to cross the street. Traffic signal controllers and cabinets will be installed that essentially replaces some outdated and inefficiencies with the operation of the traffic signal by providing enhanced control and operability for city staff that needs to make any improvements or access the traffic signal. And street signs will be installed at each of the intersections to replace worn out and kind of older street signs in order to provide better visibility in daytime, but also at nighttime at Harbor and West Capitol with the internally illuminated signs that you can see. Looks like it froze up again. Well, so for the final slide, I want to talk about the upcoming milestones for the project. So as I mentioned, currently we're working on installing the underground utility improvements for the water, electrical, and fiber optics. The water and electrical utilities are planned to be completed in the late winter, early spring of 2020. As you can see by the date to the right, anticipated to be completed by February of 2021. Pedestrian enhancements will be going concurrently with the utility improvements, and those are going to be installing curb ramps, installing the sidewalk gap closure, and various other pedestrian improvements related to concrete work and the such. And then lastly, the road resurface will begin in the spring and will be completed around the summertime. and it includes the various pavement methods that is discussed before. And following completion of road resurfacing will be striping, installing signs, and any flexible delineators, and improving the bike lanes, and completing that work. So it is currently expected that construction will be completed in the fall of 2021. Given that the work will be completed by June, but there is a kind of a period where we go through inspection and we make sure that all of the work is completed per the contract documents, and that there's the warranty period. And so fall 2021, around November, is the anticipated completion date. That completes my presentation, and I open up to the commission for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tevez. And it's really exciting to see the progress. I've been on this commission since 2017, so near the beginning of this project. So it's great to see the light at the end of the tunnel is coming up soon.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any comments or questions at this time? Well, if not, I have a couple of questions from the staff report. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the sidewalk installations. The staff report mentions sidewalks will be installed adjacent to Meadowdale neighborhood. Is that the only additional portion of sidewalk along the route, or is there now going to be a continuous sidewalk portion for pedestrian safety, essentially from where there already exists one from Jefferson at the end of West Capitol all the way down to the I-80 overpass?
That is correct. Thank you for the question. As part of the project, we are on the south side of West Capitol. The project goal is to have a continuous accessible sidewalk from Jefferson heading west to the Yolo Causeway bike trail. And so the sidewalk gap closure that I mentioned is there's a segment of sidewalk between Northport Boulevard and Garnett Street that currently does not have sidewalks. It's kind of a landscaped area. And so the plan is to have a continuous accessible sidewalk along the south side of West Capitol Avenue.
Well, I think that's really great from a pedestrian safety perspective. I once, years ago, walked from West Capitol from Harbor all the way to the Starbucks at Lake. And so there's certainly a lot of dangerous stretches along that route. So I think for the residents who live there and for the residents who will walk along there, that's a really big safety improvement, since there's been too many accidents along that route in the last few years. And then I had a question as well about the mid-block crossings, which I again think are a great safety improvement for pedestrians. So you mentioned a number of mid-block crossings, but then just the ones designated in the report are the ones that will have the additional lights to make them visible at all times of the day. Is that correct?
So each of the mid-block crossings have street lights that are planned for installation to provide visibility at the each end of the crosswalk. And so the street light should be able to illuminate pedestrians that are waiting to cross.
Got it. Okay, so it's not, for example, pedestrian crossing like the one across Lake Washington where the Clarksburg Trail is, where there are lights. It's more that there will be sufficient street lighting around the mid-block crossings for pedestrians to be visible?
So based on the lighting analysis that was provided by the consultant, we were able to space the lighting to meet the minimum standards per the city specifications or the city standards, specifically at each of the mid-block crossings. A street light will be installed in order to provide visibility and enhanced visibility at night for pedestrians. I'm not too familiar with the one at, you mentioned Lake Washington, or was that?
Yeah, by the Nugget Shopping Center. It's in my neighborhood. It's one of those crossings where there's an option for the pedestrian to push the button and the lights are flashing as they cross to increase visibility so that cars will slow down.
Okay, yes. So we are installing, those are the flashing beacons. The pedestrian presses and then it provides the indication light that a pedestrian is going to be crossing. And so those beacons will be installed at the mid-block crossings as well as the overhead street lighting.
Great. And then the final question I have is in terms of the cyclist safety along the route. You mentioned that certain segments will have a buffered bike lane, other segments will have the green paint. Is there, what's the rationale for why some segments are treated differently than others, and how are those segments selected?
Yeah, so the key component of how wide the buffer is based on the width of the roadway. And so in some cases, we were not able to meet the full 6-foot buffer just due to that we were did not have enough roadway to provide that level of buffer for the bicycling. As far as providing the green bike striping for conflict zones, where there is a driveway or intersection, we are providing the green pavement striping to notify or to provide enhanced notification for drivers that they are entering into the bike lane or that there is a conflict zone.
I see. Well, I think, taken together, all of these improvements are going to really have a notable change for the people who live and walk along that street on a regular basis. West Capitol Avenue is one of the main streets in West Sacramento, and it's been undertended for so long. So it's really positive to have this improvement. I'm really grateful the city has taken the initiative and that it's coming along. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions or comments?
I do, Chair, yes.
Commissioner Lichtenstein.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Unlike Chair Hirsch, I'm the newest member of the commission, and so I haven't been following along to every detail. This is really exciting. My question pertains more to the sidewalk rehabilitation, and I'm curious, in the feasibility studies that you did in the design studies, to what extent you considered greenery, in particular shade trees, whether they were feasible in terms of the infrastructure, financially, and then I guess moving forward, do you have plans to look into that? When I think about what makes something pedestrian friendly, sure, it's safety, that's a critical component, but it's also creating an environment where they want to walk or travel or they can without, burning up in our wonderful Sacramento heat. So if you could speak to that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is a great question. So this project was to emphasize the safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get enough grant funding to do a complete streetscape project, which would include the landscaping and other features that kind of enhance or provide additional benefits, shade, scenery, or other improvements. But as part of this project, the emphasis was to address a lot of the safety concerns of the corridor. And based on the amount of grant funding that we received for the project, we just weren't able to fully go with the streetscape type of project by providing additional improvements.
Yeah, that makes sense. I obviously don't expect, a safety improvement project to be focusing on shade trees. I guess I would just, similar to your point of it wouldn't make sense down the road to have to pull up roads you just repaved to put down, say, utilities. I'm also thinking, down the road, it would make sense if these streets were designed to someday have trees, if and when the funding comes along. But I understand it was outside the scope of this, and I thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
And then Commissioner Parker, did you have your hand raised?
I just had one question, and this is probably small, but with the construction schedule and the utility work that's going on right now, I know there's a lot of work happening around West Acre and West Capitol. Today, I think that street was entirely closed at the intersection of West Capitol and West Acre. Just a point of consideration, it would be nice to know, with the election, there's only 3 voting centers here in West Sacramento, one of them being at the Washington Unified School District headquarters. With access being limited through West Acre, I don't know, do you know if that street is going to be closed tomorrow for construction during the election, or if there's a plan or some type of communication that can be that can go out from the city's channels, just because it is, that's one of the only 3 centers that we have. It would be good to make sure that we're, increasing as much access as possible to those centers where we can.
Thank you. That is a great question. So the part of the construction work, in order to complete some of the utility improvements, does require for us to provide some street closures and also to have a detour route. Particularly providing notifications, the city has tried to make efforts to put on social media, our city website, as well as providing flyers and mailers out to residents to notify that construction work is beginning, that there is going to be some construction work coming up in your neighborhood and some possible road closures. As far as given that the upcoming election is tomorrow, I think that's something that's a great point, and is something that the notifications can go out, and we can make sure that accessibility to that particular location is available. And also part of it too is that there needs to be maintained a continuous access to all streets, to all roads. And so we do try to provide detour route signs and to guide traffic in the correct direction that they need to go in order to reach their destination.
Awesome. Well, that's great. If there's any advanced notification or any additional things that can be done, I think that would be really beneficial. But like Chair Hirsch, I'm very appreciative of all the work that staff and everybody has done. This project is going to be a tremendous asset for our community, and it's I know there's a lot of people that will be extremely pleased about those improvements. So thank you for your work on this, Ryan, and everybody else.
Other comments or questions from the commission?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. My recollection from the last time we spoke about this, which was a while ago, was that there was going to be a loss of car lanes in certain sections, but also that the city staff had done an extensive study on that and determined that there was plenty of capacity for the foreseeable future. Is my recollection correct? And if so, could you just give a quick comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Great question. I think as you had your question is kind of about the lane configuration and optimization of the corridor. And that is correct. There will be 2 lanes in each direction from Jefferson to Harbor Boulevard, and from Harbor Boulevard heading west to the Interstate 80. It will be reduced to 1 lane in each direction with the center median provided. And I think your other part of the question was the kind of the studies or the analysis that was done to make that determination, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I just wanted to have it reiterated that this was in fact thought through, and that there had been some studies about anticipated traffic in the foreseeable future.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so based on the traffic studies that were completed, the traffic volume of the corridor west of Harbor didn't quite have the volume that necessitated to have 2 lanes in each direction. And also by having that additional lane, it does influence or increase the vehicle speeding. And so a part of emphasizing or providing additional safety by having 1 lane, it does kind of help to kind of keep vehicle speeds down, especially when they're entering, in this case, a commercial, residential areas that, pedestrian safety and bicycle safety is of the highest importance. And so by providing that lane reduction, it does allow us to, still meet the traffic demands and the level of service that we have provided in the analysis, but also will increase the safety and provide additional enhancing factors for safety.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I also want to say that I'm very excited to see this project underway, and I think you've done a great job thinking it through and getting this going. So thank you very much.
Ryan, do you want me to chime in real quick about the lane configurations?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think commissioners and Chair Hirsch, I think I was present at the previous commission meeting. Perhaps I can, speak a little bit about the lane optimization. As it's currently configured, we actually have excess roadway on portions of West Capitol Avenue, especially near the Jefferson intersection. So the changes that we're proposing were analyzed to ensure there is adequate capacity for throughput. So we are retaining, 4 lanes between Harbor and Jefferson. Now, further west, to make it, again, one of the major goals of this project, as Ryan alluded to, is to make it safer for all users. That includes trucks, transit, buses, bicyclists, pedestrians. So for the portion to the west of Harbor, and for continuity of the bike lanes, we did make with policy guidance, of course, from council and from the TMI Commission. We are changing the configuration to have 2 lanes between the I-80 underpass and Harbor Boulevard. Further to the west of I-80, it actually expands out to 4 lanes again, or 2 lanes heading west, and the transition point is a little bit, it varies a little bit, but the goal is to maintain continuity for cyclists who use the causeway to commute back and forth to downtown. And based on our traffic studies, we are not significantly impacting throughput for vehicular traffic. During the entire project development, we are very mindful that the entire West Capitol Avenue corridor varies, right? From Glide west to Enterprise is technically a truck route. Therefore, we try to be mindful of having sufficient lane width to accommodate trucks to the west of Harbor Boulevard. And then between Glide and West Acre, we have a lot of residential adjacent to that portion of West Capitol Avenue, which is why, again, we, as a traffic engineer, I prefer to have control crossings at all-way stops or signalized intersections. So many of these mid-block crossings are where pedestrians are choosing to cross. They're using it. So to make it safer, we're highlighting them. We're making them more apparent to all users, to the drivers and the pedestrians, in hopes of making it safer. And many of the pedestrian vehicular collisions occur at night, which is why it's very important at these mid-block crossings that we're relocating and adding streetlights at the crossings, in addition to installing these rectangular rapid flashing beacons that are activated by the pedestrians. And as for cyclist safety within the CBD, further east of between West Acre and Jefferson, many people are not aware that we have over 50 driveways there. Many of the cyclists that encounter conflict with vehicles is via right turn hook. So one of the things that we are doing with the project is we're adding some delineation in front of these driveways or near these driveways to alert drivers, that be careful. You might have a cyclist on your right. Don't just make that right turn. Again, there are many conflict zones. And this goes back to Ryan's response earlier about the strategy as to where we apply the buffer bike lanes and where we don't. Now, unfortunately, between West Acre and Jefferson, because of the presence of so many driveways, we can't apply a buffer bike lane. That would restrict access to many of those businesses and property owners there. Right? So we are trying to make it safe. all users. And really that's a goal of the project. And I think, when it's all said and done by late next fall, hopefully we've achieved that goal. Again, our goal is to equalize the corridor for all users. That means if there's an opportunity to slow down vehicular traffic, especially in the CBD and in the residential areas, we're going to try to do that, because we know that speed above 35 miles an hour poses a much greater risk and injuries to bicyclists and pedestrians. If we can reduce the speed within residential and central business districts of West Capitol Avenue, and hopefully we've made the corridor a lot safer. So again, one more thing I want to add, congratulations to Ryan on passing his third test and getting his PE. So that was a recent accomplishment. And most importantly, he's also getting married tomorrow. So he's actually joining us on the eve of his, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Vin.
Yeah, a big congratulations to you, both of those. Sorry, Commissioner Lichtenstein, were you? Oh. No, I want to thank you, Mr. K. I think you make excellent points. It's always difficult when you transition what used to be a highway into a city street corridor, and it's been a long time coming. And so when that transition happens and certain lanes get reduced in number, there's a period where it takes time for everyone to get used to it. But I think that on the whole, all of these improvements will make this route so much safer for pedestrians, for cyclists, even for drivers, like you say, with all the curbways and entry points. All of these improvements taken together will really make this a healthy and safe Main Street. Any other comments or questions from the Commission?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both Mr. K and Mr. Tevis for giving us that explanation, because I can anticipate that the change in the lanes might be a source of stress or concern of some of the citizens. So it's good for us to understand and hear what kind of thought went into those decisions, so that they can be addressed when people express their concerns. So I want to say thank you for sharing that.
And then Commissioner Polhinas.
Just add in to thank staff, Mr. Tevis and Mr. K on the clarifications, and congratulations to you, Ryan. And hopefully this shook the jitters out of your upcoming nuptials. It was nice and well presented, concise, and the images and graphics were definitely helpful in understanding some of the various components of the project. Excited to see this moving forward and understanding how difficult it is to accommodate a project that is to accommodate so many different types of users. And I think this will be definitely helpful in reducing conflicts and injury amongst our roadways in the city of West Sacramento. Thank you.
Well, seeing as this is an information item, there's no action requested on the part of the Commission. And unless there are any further comments or questions, thank you both for your presentation, and congratulations again.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Moving on then to item 5 on tonight's agenda, consideration of a streetcar service memorandum of understanding for development of an operating and maintenance agreement with the Sacramento Regional Transit District.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, can you hear me all right?
We can.
Fantastic. So the item before you is a memorandum of understanding with the Sacramento Regional Transit District for the Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project. Specifically, this is for the reduced project that was heard before the City Council on the 19th of August 2020 this year. So for those of you that did not see that presentation, let me go back a little bit. Back in March 2019, we had a technical working group that was formed by the mayor of Sacramento, our own mayor, as well as working group members from SMUD, from the City of Sacramento Mayor's Office, from the Air Quality Management District, as well as some other members that were interested in the streetcar project moving forward. This was the result of having put the full streetcar project out to bid, which was the 7-track mile approximately project that extended between West Sacramento Civic Center and the waterfront over to 19th Street in Midtown Sacramento. That project came in significantly over the engineer's estimate and the budget for the project. So what we wound up doing was forming this technical working group to look at different alternatives. One of those requirements of that alternative was to review different project potential alternatives while still retaining the $50 million allocated through the Obama administration for the streetcar project, as well as the $30 million that we had received from the state through TIRSIP, that's the Transit and Intercity Regional Capital Program funding for fixed rail systems. So it's a total of $80 million that we had allocated to the project through state and federal grant programs. What we wound up doing was, after a lot of meetings and a lot of back and forth, we came to the conclusion that a reduced project alternative within the existing streetcar footprint was in order. That was also included in your packet that I provided to you. That is a 1.51 track miles. There is some double track there for a 1.1 route mile extension over Tower Bridge into West Sacramento. This is extremely important because we have had since the 90s, I'm sure some of you do know, our Southport Framework Plan has always been built around the idea that we would be extending fixed guideway rail into Southport. So that is how the Southport Town Center has been envisioned. We have had 100 feet of right-of-way already set aside next to the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail in order to relocate the trail and have rail extending into Southport at some point in time. Although that over the years that vision has kind of been lost and has been changed, morphed into the streetcar project. Streetcar, though, still provides a much needed connection over the Sacramento River, especially for those who commute into the Bay Area, although not as much now with the current pandemic. However, commuters still use the Capitol Corridor. It is one of the most frequently used rail corridors in the United States. So right at this point in time, in order for folks to access that, they either need to take public transit, a bus connection over to Capitol Mall, hop on light rail, and then get over to the station. The streetcar provides an opportunity to have a direct connection between West Sacramento into Sacramento Valley Station. In addition, it provides an opportunity for potentially rerouting the Green Line so that the existing Green Line to the River District in Sacramento could connect directly to West Sacramento. And in the future, West Sacramento residents could ride directly to the airport. So this is an essential connection for all of our future planning for our transit-oriented development districts, including the Washington District and the Bridge District. Back on the 18th, we had gone to the Sacramento City Council, and this was August 18th, 2020, and the City Council received a presentation from their staff. I had included in the staff report here a lot of the information that was provided to the City Council was incorrect. We were not provided an opportunity, although I was texting staff to correct some of the statements that were made that were inaccurate. However, we did not get an opportunity to do that. We did get an opportunity to provide information at the City Council, and I did so the following day. Sacramento City Council, although they had expressed mixed views of the reduced streetcar project, the mayor and some key City Council members were still in favor of the project, although the vote wound up being to defund the project to a significant amount, while at the same time supporting the project, not unlike smashing somebody's headlight and asking them to drive in the dark. So the next day, we did bring this to the City Council. The City Council reiterated the support here in West Sacramento for the project. We did not address the funding issue. Instead, the mayor, I believe it was the mayor, had stated that it was West Sacramento's expectation that Sacramento will fulfill their contractually obligated funding commitments. We have not seen that to date. However, we did wind up going on the 24th, August 24th, board to Sacramento Regional Transit. There, the board members heard a presentation on the status of the streetcar project, what the intent was, and how we plan to move forward. It was not a positive result, and the Regional Transit District, on their weighted system with the greatest amount of votes, it's weighted by investment. So how much you receive service from Sacramento Regional Transit District, that is how much you pay into it. And the more you pay, the greater your vote counts. So with Sacramento County and City of Sacramento having the greatest votes, it was a split vote, and the motion did not carry on that split vote. Congresswoman Matsui, you may have heard in the news, was disappointed with the results. She did state back in the technical working group a year prior that one of the top priorities of this project was to get over the Sacramento River and serve West Sacramento. That is a direct statement from Congresswoman Matsui. So once the vote did not proceed in the affirmative, my understanding is Congresswoman Matsui had several meetings with members of the board, and it was decided, the Sacramento Regional Transit Board put on the agenda for September 14th the exact same item. At that meeting, it did carry by a narrow margin. But one of the conditions of that was that the City of Sacramento either join the Regional Transit District or we are contractually joined through an operating and maintenance agreement. So the other part of that was that the board wanted this to be completed by the end of this year. Immediately following that, our attorneys got together, including with Regional Transit. I was involved, as well as staff of Regional Transit and our own city attorney, and we came to the conclusion very quickly that with a memorandum of understanding, or excuse me, with an operations and maintenance agreement being so complex, it would take a significant amount of time, more time than we would have factoring in the holidays, voting, everything else that is happening this year, as well as general slowdowns that tend to plague the pandemic years. So in any case, the agreement was that we proceed with a memorandum of understanding, which essentially is a framework that has been developed in concert between West Sacramento and Sacramento Regional Transit District on what we are going to include in the operating and maintenance agreement. This is not unlike how the city of Folsom eventually annexed into the Sacramento Regional Transit District. I believe that they had for about 3 years in place an agreement for operating and maintenance. So we're following in similar format to what was done there. And much of the framework that you have seen as part of your packet through this MOU is identical to what Sacramento Regional Transit District in the city of Folsom had agreed to. So with that, that is roughly where we're at. If and when this gets passed, following your recommendation to the City Council, we will be immediately working with Regional Transit to start developing that operating and maintenance agreement. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy, for the very detailed presentation. This is probably one of the most talked about transportation projects that has come up in my time on the commission. And I know it's talked about in the community and across the region. So really looking forward to the discussion tonight. Commissioners, any feedback or questions at this time? And if not, I'll start off. it's been really interesting to see how this project has morphed from the original. I was here back in 2018 in July. The staff report says was the last full update that staff gave to the commission. So I think that most of my commissioners weren't on the commission at this time. So it's been really enlightening to see how the project has developed from the initial planning phases to now. When it was first presented, there was talk about the streetcars being, a different mode of transportation than light rail, different cars themselves, different rail. With everything that's going on now, is that still the case, or is this more similar to the existing light rail cars that are operated by SAC-RT?
This is a question that came up at the city council meeting as well, and it deserves a lot of attention. So when we originally started talking about streetcars, so this was back in 2008. I have only been with the city since 2014, so this has been a long discussion. Streetcar was differentiated from light rail in that streetcar primarily operates on street, hence the name, within the existing vehicle right-of-way and with traffic. Streetcars of the past, if you're thinking of trolleys, for instance, were typically smaller. As time progressed, streetcars themselves became more and more modern and required more and more folks to want to ride it to pencil out. Hence, the vehicles became a little bit larger. Now they're indistinguishable largely from light rail vehicles. You may be able to go to some spots like Portland, Oregon, for instance. If you look at their streetcar vehicles versus their light rail vehicles, the MAX line, you'll see that the light rail vehicles are, I believe, I don't know if they're operating on Siemens vehicles, but they are larger vehicles than what was produced for their streetcars. You go to Utah, for instance, and in Utah, they're operating vehicles for their light rail. They're identical to other places that are using them as streetcars. So like Kansas City streetcar, for instance, are the same size vehicles that you would see in today's light rail or comparable to some of the Siemens vehicles that we're running here. And in fact, of all of the, when we were doing the procurement for the light rail, the streetcar vehicles, light rail manufacturers were the ones who were submitting bids for these because it's the same vehicle. They operate on the same fixed guideway system, same steel rails, steel wheels, steel rails. So largely, as far as the streetcar goes for this project, it is using light rail vehicles, no matter how you slice it. And in fact, in Sacramento, the light rail system itself operates in street with traffic for a significant portion of the line, at least within the city of Sacramento. Therefore, our own system, the Sacramento Regional Transit System, operates as both a light rail system and it operates as a streetcar system. So it stands to reason that as we progressed in this project and with the understanding for many years now that Sacramento Regional Transit, as mandated by the Federal Transit Administration, would be operating the streetcar line for no less than a period of 5 years. To the extent that these vehicles can be the same, it reduces the operation and maintenance costs associated with either the streetcar project or with light rail, and having to go back and forth between different facilities does not necessarily make the most sense. So even when we were envisioning streetcar going down Riverfront Street in West Sacramento, for instance, the maintenance facility there would have mostly the same equipment that you would see at Sacramento Regional Transit's maintenance facility. So as far as the number of passengers it's going to carry, how it functions, how it looks, the size, it is identical to light rail. And as we move forward with this, one of this project, one of the questions that we asked ourselves is, well, are we calling this streetcar? Or are we calling it light rail? And when we asked ourselves that question at the technical working group, we posed that to the Federal Transit Administration and said, look, largely this is light rail. We had talked about a light rail extension into West Sacramento that the streetcar line would be operating on. For those of you who have been on the commission for a while, you remember that I had presented that as, is it light rail, is it streetcar, some time ago. The Federal Transit Administration had a very interesting response in that despite how it functions and using the exact same vehicles, if you call it light rail, we have to reapply. But if we call it streetcar, we're fine. So don't change the name, was the response that we received from the Federal Transit Administration. And since we are guided on working with them to obtain our grant agreement through the FTA, we definitely followed their advice and retained the name streetcar. However, the intention is that it will still operate using light rail vehicles, and it will be largely indistinguishable from the SAC-RT transit system.
I really appreciate that information, Mr. McCoy. You know, it's, as you've just explained, you know, it looks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, but if there are reasons for purposes of the grant application that we have to use the terminology streetcar, certainly understanding of that. I think at this point, the streetcar project has become so wrapped up in community discussions because it's seen as something entirely new and extravagant. But if this is really envisioned as just, you know, the West Sac light rail line, you know, it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. It's that we're just simply extending an already existent, trusted form of public transit into West Sacramento. And like you said, in compliance with West Sacramento planning documents going back decades at this point. So I'm fully supportive of any project that broadens the city's sustainable mobility strategy and helps build those connections between West Sacramento and Sacramento, you know, whether that's buses, bus rapid transit, streetcar, light rail, whatever you want to call it. I think it's just so important to have increased connections and strengthened connections. And now that the policy decisions have been made by the bodies at SAC-RT and elsewhere to move forward with this project, I think it's incumbent upon this commission and the city to make the project as strong as possible. And so looking at the memorandum of understanding that was attached in the staff report, a couple of questions that I have. And the first one, as you've mentioned already, is that the city of Sacramento voted to move forward with the project, but to take away the funding or to not fulfill their funding commitment they've already made when it comes to the project development review process. And I noted in the staff report, it mentioned that SACOG had even offered a loan to the city of Sacramento to cover that portion. Did the city of Sacramento not respond or respond and decline? Has there been any conversation at the staff level or at the official level about how the city of Sacramento wants to move forward with that? You mentioned the mayor back in August, the mayor of West Sacramento back in August envisioned that the commitments will be met. Has there been any conversation in that regard so far? And if not, what exactly is the deadline that someone needs to step up to provide the funding for the review process?
So I can give you, that is something that's not just politics. So I can tell you that there is a deadline. So the Federal Transit Administration had previously said that there was a deadline that was, I believe it was August 15th. I would have to go back through my staff report to find that exact date. I apologize. That we must have our application, so annually, sorry, let me back up a little bit. When you apply for a small starts grant, you must reapply annually. It is not something that you just submit an application and wait for somebody to say yes or no. You have to actually continually reapply over and over and provide an extensive amount of information to the FTA, everything from ridership figures to latest costs to status of the project, and where you're at with your funding sources, et cetera. So when we needed to reapply, you'll notice that these meetings were held back to back to back. We went to Sacramento City Council on the 18th. We went to ourselves on the 19th. We went on the 24th to Regional Transit. And the reason for that is that we had a very strict deadline. Actually, I think it was the 28th of August, so we went to the 24th to the RT board. When it was declined at that point, I myself had even sent an email thanking everybody, and it's been a journey, and there we go. However, I have to say, Congresswoman Matsui has been absolutely fantastic with regard to continually supporting our efforts for regional transit, regionalism, and trying to work toward providing high quality mass transit to West Sacramento. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but the Federal Transit Administration has changed a little bit on that deadline and has now said that because we were previously in the Small Starts Grant pipeline, that we are extended a deadline till we can get it in, and they will continue to work with us up to September 2021 is when the funding must be appropriated. We must have a grant agreement by that time. So we are looking at this MOU as a step in accordance with what Regional Transit wants to see to get moving on this. Once we have this MOU, we can then start moving forward with, we've already finished the application. We never did submit it. So now we can submit that application. We can get back into the process with the FTA. We can get the information from them on what it is that they need from us, latest ridership figures, et cetera, to get everything that is required and a level of comfort from the Federal Transit Administration for them to say, yes, you can get your grant agreement and you can get your $50 million for that project as appropriated. And at that point in time, as we move forward, once we get that, then our TIRCIP funding, the $30 million, will be freed up. So I'm hoping, I'm sorry, that was kind of a wandering explanation, but there's so many details involved in this. So hopefully I've answered your question. Maybe I can go back to one other thing. I don't know what's happening 100% with the city of Sacramento. I do know that at the time that and I will just preface this with being informed assumption. At the time that the city of Sacramento received the affirmative on the soccer stadium, which included, it's located along the Green Line. We had included in our TIRCIP application the potential for double tracking that Green Line in the future. And that's that TIRCIP, TIRCP, the $30 million that we had received for streetcar. There were meetings held after that to see, without the city of West Sacramento, to see if that $30 million appropriated to the streetcar could then be moved to the soccer stadium for the city of Sacramento's benefit. My understanding is that they received word that potentially it could, and all of a sudden, there were a lot of folks that were no longer in favor of the streetcar over the river. And at that time, there were some other meetings that were held. I think since then, Congresswoman Matsui has been informed of all the meetings that have been taking place, and I think that that's no longer the case, that streetcar has received 100% support from Matsui, and therefore that funding is going to stay with streetcar, and we are still pushing to have streetcar over the river. There have been a lot of things that have happened with the city of Sacramento that I just cannot explain with regard to not participating in meetings any longer, not interested in funding the project any longer, and I have to chalk that up to politics.
That's helpful. And, you know, I don't expect you to be clairvoyant and know entirely everything that's going on, but it's good to have that context and to know what may be happening moving forward. The other question I had is not about the planning, but about the operations and maintenance agreement. And looking at page 4 of the staff report, it mentions that it was expected that O&M costs will be shared between West Sacramento, SAC-RT, other potential partners, and funded by sales tax revenue and other funding sources. Are there other potential partners that have been identified at this time, or is this another way of describing our neighbor city?
That's strictly describing our neighbor city. We don't know whether or not they are still intending to help pay for some of the mains. There are 2 stops in Sacramento at Sacramento Valley Station and one over in front of the hotel over by Embassy Suites by Tower Bridge there. And then there's the stop in front of Sutter Health Park. At this point in time, as I said, Sacramento has declined to participate in any of the meetings we've had with Sacramento Regional Transit. So we have to assume that there may or may not be funding available for operations and maintenance. And SAC-RT has been, really great to work with on this. We have been trying to, look at different ways that we could fund this or change the service. For instance, as I said, streetcar is operating on the line. The Green Line could extend all the way to West Sacramento every other trip, every other headway. So we're trying to find ways that we could get more ridership. More ridership means that we have more revenue coming in and reduce costs from the city to provide that service. We did identify with the original streetcar project funding through Measure K that could help with operation and maintenance of the streetcar. So we're just going to continue looking at this as we develop this O&M agreement. And I think, I'll be bringing this before the commission as we move forward, along with more details about where we're at with the project.
I appreciate that. And I think it's great to hear that SAC-RT has been a really great partner to work with. I have the utmost respect for the staff at SAC-RT and the vision that the leaders have. And, when asking the commission to provide feedback about the O&M agreement, in my mind, even though we call this a streetcar project, I think of it as being very analogous to the Folsom Light Rail line, like has been previously mentioned. It's another extension of SAC-RT's operations to a separate city from the central business district. When the Folsom Light Rail line was first started and the agreements were made between the city of Folsom and SAC-RT and the city of Sacramento, was it a similar structure to what's proposed in this O&M agreement? Was there a difference in terms of the entities participating in terms of the funding and the operations? Is this something that's based off of the existing, what's worked in the past, or is this sort of a new creation?
This is cut from the same cloth of the operations and maintenance agreement for the city of Folsom. It's the same categories, same concerns: security, maintenance of the stations, maintenance of the vehicles, how much of the right-of-way is being maintained outside of our regional transit right-of-way. So for instance, you have a track going down the street. Well, who's maintaining up to the track? And, we know regional transit has agreed they'll maintain 2 feet outside of the track. That's very standard. I believe it's the same in Sacramento as it is in all the other cities that are participating with light rail. So this is not something new. It's not something that's bold or different or groundbreaking. We are simply in this MOU saying we're agreeing to come to an agreement with the O&M, and with the O&M, it's very standard.
No, that's good to hear. And when I was reviewing the MOU, it's good to know that it's standard. I think the terms in terms of street maintenance and maintaining the facilities, all seems very straightforward and in the best interest of the city. Those are my comments at this time. I don't know, fellow commissioners, any questions or feedback for the staff?
I guess I have some comments and question to follow up. It's It's unfortunate how this project's evolved in the past couple of years. I was a huge supporter of this project when it was conceived. I participated on some panels about 10 years ago and seeking feedback on, in some focus groups. It was something I was very excited about. But as the project has significantly decreased in scope and scale, and kind of the emergence of other mobility technologies, my outlook on this project is is quite diminished. That's not to say I appreciate all the dedication and hard work that you and other staff have committed to this project. I know I can expect that there's been many long nights, frustrated evenings, and back and forth and trying to make some numbers work. But I think that my concern is that once this project does get implemented and constructed, and when we're looking to secure some, on the West Sacramento side, to perhaps extend it, that there will be better technologies, there will be better innovations that can move people in a manner that isn't fixed, that can be more flexible and could be just to various demands. And also will have a lot less operation and maintenance than a fixed rail system. Also be a lot less capital investment. So typically I'm all for any transit, especially fixed transit in transit-oriented development type settings. But if this project cannot move forward, what would be the alternative for the city, the locally based funds that are generated for this project? And is that a consideration yet as to what the city will do with locally raised funds with Measure, I believe, is it Measure V?
That's Measure V, correct.
Measure V funds, if this project cannot proceed?
It has not been an option, truthfully, at this point, because we do have the voters responding through Measure V and Measure U. So we have direction from the voters, from City Council, and we continue to proceed in accordance with what's in our planning documents, including the Southport Framework Plan, General Plan, Bridge District Specific Plan, Washington Specific Plan. If this project were to fall through and we did not receive the federal funding, then we would need to really look at this, because technologies aside, there's only so much that can move a mass of people into an area. There's only so many technologies. VIA is not going to do it. You can't have 5 people on a van and move the same amount as 120 people on the light rail or streetcar at a time. So you're talking about a lot of emissions, a lot of congestion to move the same amount of people. Rideshare services are great, but they do contribute to congestion, just like any other automobile. 2 people in a car going to the same destination is still a car on the road. We have the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change that is mandating reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to a staggering level. And at this point, without having light rail, in order to move those mass hordes of people going from Southport, going from the states, going from our Bridge District and Washington District over the river to other destinations, without it, I don't know how we're going to achieve that. A bus is great. A large bus or a bus rapid transit is also great, but it's still, like fixed guideway, will require off-street or dedicated transit lanes. So you can imagine we would need a lane, and in some cases 2 lanes down Jefferson with dedicated BRT in order to accomplish the same goal that we would be accomplishing with light rail vis-a-vis down the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail or near the Clarksburg Branch Line Trail as it used to be. But again, I'm talking about way down into the future. This project is just looking to get over the river. at this point, we could use VIA and our local bus YCTD to drop folks off at the station. They could hop on the light rail system and get over the river into the regional transit system with ease. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you, because we were racking our brains on this as staff to figure out, well, what happens if this doesn't happen? Because congestion will get significantly worse over time. And without mass transit, we are not going to solve the climate change crisis. We are not going to solve congestion issues. And unfortunately, until we have an answer of technology being able to address moving large amounts of people a way that is better than large buses or light rail can do, I'm not exactly sure what our solution is. But I will tell you, the focus on light rail has been the fact that this is not disputed. This is completely undisputed too, that ridership for light rail vehicles is significantly greater than for bus transit, all things equal. We don't know why. We call it rail bias. It is just something that occurs. Folks tend to want to ride the train more than they want to ride a bus. And at this point, we continue to work with YCTD to try to encourage folks to use the regional bus service. But more and more, we are finding that we are having to cut service because folks are not riding from the Southport area, and lines that have been there for a long time are just not getting used.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy and Vice Chair Polhemus. Any other questions or feedback? Sorry, Vice Chair Polhemus, were you about to speak? Other commissioners? Commissioner Lichtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. I very much appreciated your summary. I've been following along and trying to keep the chronology in my brain, but hearing you lay it out was really helpful. I have a question about the impact stemming from COVID and potential permanent telework options. You mentioned an interest in getting folks over the river and getting folks to the Amtrak station and trying to anticipate future transportation needs, et cetera. I'm one of those people that lives in the Washington district, and I work downtown and I commute over the river, and I was really excited for this line. And I was recently told that I'll probably be given a permanent telework option. So I'm wondering whether you've done analyses, and I'm sure everything's very rudimentary right now, you don't have the data you need, but whether you have a sense of, long-term how telework options are going to impact transportation needs, and whether the system itself would still be feasible given a plummeting ridership.
Thank you for that question. We've had the same questions, especially given that majority of the staff here in West Sacramento were telecommuting as well. That question has been coming up pretty often with some of our developers here with regard to some of the transit and transportation investments that are required to be developed with some of our larger scale projects. The big question that we've had, and very recently, a couple of our prominent developers have asked directly the question, well, if people are going to be telecommuting, do I need to do this anymore? And I actually had a meeting myself, and Sarah Strander, I think, is on the line as well. We met with SACOG and we posed that exact question. Have we changed the way that we're envisioning folks commuting to an extent that we're rethinking how we're doing the regional transportation model? Our regional model is long-term. Our own local traffic model is based on the regional model. They said yes. A lot of folks have been asking that question, but the general assumption is still going to be that the model is long-term. We're looking, 50 years, 30, 50 years in the future. The assumption is still that things will get back to normal, or that things are going to continue proceeding to a point that eventually folks will be commuting as they were before into the downtown. the same developers have, said to me that their own leases are down as much as 60% in the downtown core. Now that's a staggering figure. And I don't, at this point, your guess is kind of as good as mine on what the long-term, effect of this is going to be. And I think at this point, we are just going to take it day by day and figure out, okay, well, if more needs to be done to analyze continuing traffic patterns or commuter patterns, or how we're looking at land use for if we're still looking at mixed use as being a preponderance in a lot of areas, or if we're looking at a lot less commercial and office and a lot more residential. That's all something that we're going to have to continue to look at as we move forward with some of our planning documents. At this point, that is, again, a question that I can't answer at this point, but we have been asking that question.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? Well, I'll add on for right now then to say, it's really an interesting time, isn't it? With all the changes that are happening, it's hard to envision what the future models will be. But I tend to think, as you alluded to, Mr. McCoy, that things will eventually bounce back, if not fully in terms of work, that downtown Sacramento and midtown Sacramento will still be the region's core for restaurants and for entertainment, and that it's really important to build those increased modes of transportation and mass transit connections between West Sacramento and downtown Sacramento. If I can be entirely candid, the 1.51 mile track mile, not even mile, but track mile portion that is this first segment is definitely not my first choice, but it's with the understanding that this is the foundation that will be built upon later, that there will be additional rail lines that stretch up through Washington, perhaps to Broderick and Bright, or down Jefferson, or down South River Road to further into Southport. And so that eventually there will be this regional form of mass transit for the residents of West Sacramento to get to downtown Sacramento. And so I am very supportive of that vision, with the understanding that this project, as it's envisioned right now, is just the first step of that model. Like you said about rail bias, I'm not an expert in transportation policy, but I understand that rail bias is certainly a thing. I happen to like bus rapid transit. I had a great experience on BRT when I went to Lima, Peru. I think it's a great system, but I also have had great experiences on fixed rail. And I understand that as the yellow bus ridership numbers in West Sacramento have shown, rail bias exists, and that there is, for whatever reason, more ridership enthusiasm for that model. And so I'm supportive of this project moving forward. Reviewing the MOU that's before us today, I think it's a good framework, as you said, based on the existing agreements that were made for the Folsom Light Rail line, and understanding that this is really an MOU that provides a vision for whatever the O&M agreement terms will be, and we'll see that as they are developed. Are there any other commission comments or questions? Commissioner Zimmer.
Sure. I just want to say thank you for a very interesting discussion. There's an awful lot to chew on here, and I appreciate the candidness with which Mr. McCoy has spoken, including with things that I think none of us can predict, which is how regional transit might change due to telecommuting. Although I do kind of want to point out that although a lot of us are telecommuting, there are an awful lot of jobs out there that will never telecommute, and and that might also be something that gets considered in a regional transit. Like, for example, anybody that works in a hospital, they're going to have to go into that hospital, and so maybe the focus will shift from connecting downtown to connecting hospitals and residential areas, or industrial areas, things where folks maybe will never have the option to telecommute. So I do agree with many of the comments. I think this connection is important, but it will be great to get West Sacramento connected with the rest of the region. And I have driven a little bit recently, and I have to say it's still pretty busy out there, on the highways during commute hours and on 50 on 80, even though a lot of us are telecommuting. So I think there is a lot of people still moving around, going to work, and so I'm optimistic that these projects will be used and be valuable and be a part of our regional transit connection in the future. So.
I think it's a great point, Commissioner Zimmer, especially with the hospital offices downtown being so close. I don't know if there'll be hospital facilities that come into the city of West Sacramento. So having this form of mass transit to get to the hospitals, or I don't know what the future of movie theaters are. I don't know if there would ever be a movie theater built in West Sacramento, considering there's one so close in downtown Sacramento. But again, Sacramento has some of those facilities that we don't have and maybe won't have because of the proximity. So having that method of transportation, I think is so important. And unless there are any other commissioner questions or comments, I know that the staff's recommended action is to 1, review and provide comments on the MOU, and then 2, to recommend that the City Council approve the MOU as a framework for the O&M agreement. And so without any further comments or questions, I'll go ahead and move that action. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Chair Hirsch and a second by Commissioner Love. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Okay. Commissioner Lichtenstein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Polhamus?
Aye, and I hope it overcomes my skepticism.
Okay. Commissioner Zimmer?
Aye.
Commissioner Parker?
Aye.
Chair Hirsch?
Aye.
Commissioner Love?
Aye.
And we have 2 absents, Wetzel and Chrisman Kaufman. So that's 6 ayes and 2 absent. Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And thank you again, Mr. McCoy. I look forward to the future presentations once the MOU has been further developed and we can review the O&M agreement.
Thank you.
With that, moving along on the agenda to General Administration Function Part 2, item 6A is the Transportation Mobility and Infrastructure Commission calendar. It says the next regular meeting of the TMI Commission is scheduled for Monday, January 4th, 2021. And then additionally, Madam Clerk, I believe a special meeting has been scheduled at this point?
Yes, there is a special meeting at 6 p.m. on December 7th. So that will come first.
Looking forward to it. One last commission meeting before the end of the year.
Yes.
Item 6B is reports from city staff. Are there any reports at this time?
Good evening, Chair Hirsch. Yes, there is one report from city staff. This is Sarah Strand, Senior Transportation Planner. And at the request of the commission, I'm here to provide just a brief overview and an update on the status of micromobility operations in the city. So this is referring to bike share and scooter share operations. As you may suspect, COVID-19, the pandemic did have some significant impacts on operations of shared rideables throughout the city. Just to give a little quick background for those who may be less familiar with the long history of bike share and scooter share in the city. The bike share system was launched as part of a regional consortium of which the city of West Sacramento was part of, including City of Sacramento, City of Davis, and led under the auspices of SACOG. That was initially launched in an agreement through a company called Social Bicycles. It was originally going to be part of a public system. Social Bicycles then privatized and rebranded themselves as Jump Bike Share. And very soon after they launched in March 2018, they were almost immediately acquired by Uber. So the red bikes that most of you are familiar with, you will know have been operating as Uber jump bikes for the majority of the time they've been in the city. When the pandemic hit, the Uber assessed their operations across the country, and they really were not in a situation to have enough PPE and capacity to keep all of their deployments out on the street and do so safely. So they did continue operations in some select cities that were very dense urban areas with a lot of ridership. Sacramento area was not one of them, and they pulled all devices off of the street in March. Shortly thereafter, we were notified that Uber would be selling the jump operation. It would be getting acquired by Lime, who some of you may also be familiar with. We had entertained an agreement with Lime some years ago, and that had fallen through, but they had been operating scooters for a very short time in Sacramento, and they'd independently pulled out of that market just based on ridership. With this change in the acquisition of the jump bikes, this required some negotiation around the regional agreement that was in place through the SACOG regional bike share program. And so beginning in August, earlier than August, throughout the summer, there was negotiations ongoing to determine what the terms of that agreement would look like for Lime to take over operations of the regional bike share system. Nationally, we've seen bike share trending down. Many have closed their doors on bike share operations. A lot of the private companies have shifted entirely to scooters. And the reason for that is really they're telling public agencies that it's just profitability. The Uber Jump program had let us know that they were losing about $5 per ride on the bike share system, the way that it had previously been priced and operated. They had a strategy in place that was really starting to look like they were going to overcome that barrier before the pandemic. But that was kind of the last straw that broke them. And so Lime has been taking a shot at it, but they have definitely put more of an emphasis on scooters because that's where they're able to recoup more of their investment. So a long period of time was put into negotiating how many bikes we could get back out on the street. And as you may suspect, this was critical to the city to ensure that we're continuing to provide access to these devices that many have either come to rely on for regular transportation, but also trying to preserve some of the gains that we were seeing in terms of VMT reduction and just encouraging more people to walk and bike as a normal mode of transportation. In late August, the Bike Share Policy Steering Committee, on which our mayor sits, they did approve the reassignment of a contract to Lime to continue the operations of the bike share program. But it really only covers a temporary time frame through early next year. And so in order for SACOG to preserve a longer term program, there are ongoing conversations around this, which I'll touch on a little bit more in a moment. In the meantime, we still, at the local government level, operate our own micromobility permitting program, even though we are part of the regional bike share program. And so we govern, and have authority over permitting the operations of any micromobility vendor. So Lime was required to apply to begin operating their devices again in the city. And once we cracked open the ordinance, we realized that there's a lot of cleanup and modifications that we're going to need to do to our micromobility ordinance. It was passed over a year and a half ago at a time when there was a lot more uneasiness about micromobility programs. There was a lot of headlines around, piles of bikes piling up in the right of way and people getting in crashes. And so our insurance requirements were some of the highest in the country compared to other cities' programs. And our fee structure had been developed really initially to just be a pilot because we weren't sure if we were going to get overwhelmed with resident complaints and have a lot of city staff time having to be spent on this program, or if we were going to have great partners and good operators and it was going to be a very light touch. And after reassessing, we've observed that our fees are about twice as high as they need to be to recover the costs of managing the program. So for those key reasons, the insurance and the fees, as well as just some inconsistencies that we found in the ordinance. This is something that we've decided that we're going to be taking back to the City Council between the December and January timeframe to propose some amendments. And in the meantime, what we've done with the authorization of the City Manager's Office is we've issued temporary permits to operate to Lime. And that allowed us to apply the revised insurance and reduced fee structure for now, until we get a cleaned up ordinance in place with the new year. So in the meantime, Lime has provided us with some ridership updates. We're seeing they've been operating since the very end of August. September, we saw about 2,200 scooter trips and about 450 bike trips. And in October, we saw a little bit of a bump up, about 3,500 scooter trips and 870 bike trips. For comparison, the Uber Jump program was doing about the same amount in a week. And we're doing that much in a month now. So we're about like 25 to 30% of where we were at in February of this year. So ridership is definitely taking a hit. In terms of other operators, in October, we were approached by Spin Scooters, who were previously already operating in City of Sacramento. And we extended the same terms and conditions of a temporary permit to operate to them to be equitable to all the operators who are interested in coming to West Sacramento. And they were issued a permit to launch up to 250 scooters maximum in West Sacramento. And I'll backtrack for a moment just to let you know, Lime was permitted to operate up to 100 bikes and 100 scooters. Neither operator is hitting those maximums yet. Their intent is really just to kind of try to phase up or scale up as demand merits it, because ridership is still very unpredictable. As our previous conversation with Jason's item demonstrated, there's just still a lot of uncertainty, and it's really difficult to project how people are going to return to using these types of devices. However, Spin has been operating for about a month now. They've seen about 624 rides, and they have reported that they have between 150 to 200 unique riders using their system. Both of our existing operators are offering promotions for Election Day tomorrow, so I'll plug both of those right now, and feel free to spread the word if you know anybody who needs some transportation assistance. Lime is providing free rides all day tomorrow using the promo code Lime to Polls 2020. And Spin is offering free rides using the promo code Spin to Vote. They'll actually get $10 in ride credits on Spin. So in terms of additional operators that we may be seeing in the coming month, Bird has now also expressed interest in introducing scooters into West Sacramento. And all three of these operators have been proposing citywide service areas, but the two existing operators have been concentrating their deployments in the north half of the city, which is fairly aligned with where we were seeing the most demand previously, especially along the riverfront and Drake's at the Barn, which was known as the heads above everything else, the top destination that we were observing pre-COVID, and has continued to be a very popular spot. However, we're interested in, as ridership returns, hoping that we can work with these operators to start to extend service a little bit further south. Through some of the outreach we've been doing for the Mobility Action Plan, we have received a lot of feedback from the community, from folks saying, if there was better access to these devices in central and southern parts of West Sacramento, we would definitely use them more often. And this is a little bit of a challenging situation because, similar to transit, as you get into a lower density development pattern, it can become more challenging for the operators in terms of cost recovery to have to run out and pick up just one device as opposed to picking up 12 devices and bringing them back to recharge or rebalance. However, it's something that we're really interested in working with these partners to explore further in the future, particularly as part of our mobility action plan, and making sure that we're providing a really, robust and diverse array of mobility options for folks to get around. In terms of challenges that we've been having, we've only had one complaint so far to date of a scooter blocking a sidewalk. So that is good news that we're not having much of a burden on staff so far, but that could, of course, be a symptom of the low ridership as well. And we have observed Razor recently launched in the past month in the city of Sacramento with their own scooter share program. And they have, without being permitted to operate, had devices dropped in the city of West Sacramento on 2 occasions. And so we are reminding them that they need to apply for a permit to operate their devices here. So moving forward, as I mentioned, we'll be working on those revisions to the micromobility ordinance, taking that to the City Council in December and January for a first and second hearing. Some of the things that we'll also be including in there, in addition to changing the insurance requirements and proposing some reductions to fees, may include exploring an elimination of fees for bike share, because we understand the economics of the bike share program and how challenging it is for operators to actually get it on the streets. That may be a way for us to help incentivize getting bikes on the ground while maintaining a fee program for scooters. This is something that we'll be continuing to discuss at City Council. But other things that we'll be working in are just some general cleanup in terms of making sure we have more explicit indemnification in our permit program, potentially exploring some stricter fees for bad actors by way of things like impoundment or fees around penalties rather than placing upfront burden on operators who are being good partners and not causing a burden on city staff. And then lastly, one of the ones I've been working on the most lately is developing a little bit more rigorous data sharing requirements. What we have in our current permit guidelines is a little bit vague. And in the future, we are hoping to piggyback on a performance monitoring system that the city of Sacramento built in-house that could really facilitate our data intake and oversight and make it a lot easier for us to monitor these programs, as well as produce more visual and accessible reports for yourselves and the City Council to understand how operations are going as we get more vendors and more devices out on the streets in the coming year. And so lastly, I'll just note, we're continuing to work with the SACOG Regional Bike Share PMT and the Policy Steering Committee through the negotiations of a long-term agreement with Lime to find ways to keep bike share on the ground without disruption for those who have become accustomed to using it. But in the meantime, there are some discussions, just very academic and theoretical at this point in time, to explore if something were to fall through with Lime, what other alternatives do we have? And so we'll be discussing just very high level, are there other models that we should be looking to in terms of revisiting a public system, partnering with nonprofits, looking for, private sponsorships similar to the way that Nike sponsors the Bike Town program in Portland. And that will be brought to the Bike Share PSC in late November, I believe. So with that, I will wrap things up. But if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to try to answer them now, or if you have very specific interests, then I'm happy to come back with a follow-up report at a later meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Strand. Yeah, I find all this information incredibly informative and really appreciate you sharing it with the commission tonight. First and foremost, I think the city's micromobility program has been a great success. If VIA is sort of the gold standard for a transportation program that was quickly and warmly accepted by the residents of West Sacramento, I think that the bike shares and the scooter shares are just below it. There was some awkwardness in the beginning in terms of placement and being left on the curbs and sidewalks, as you mentioned, but that happened everywhere. And I think those ridership numbers that you've mentioned, as well as what I've read in the news about the Sacramento market being one of the largest markets globally when it comes to usership of these devices, really speaks to the hunger and the need for something like this for the residents of West Sacramento to use. So I'm glad to hear that they've made a safe return back to the streets, and especially glad to hear that the operators have expressed some interest in perhaps expanding the distribution further to neighborhoods in the city that right now aren't as served, understandably, because they're less dense. But I think even in those areas, there's a desire, if you build it, they will come. If you provide the scooter on the sidewalk, people may ride it all the way from Bridgeway Lakes to downtown. So really glad to hear about those developments. And in terms of the ordinance, needing a few tweaks, perhaps to align it with other models that are out there, I think that makes complete sense, since the city was a pioneer in this area and was really coming up with this on the fly. And for the most part, it's worked great. But if there are areas to improve it, I think it makes sense to revisit the ordinance. And in terms of bikes versus scooters, if there's ways the city can help provide both forms in terms of fee adjustments, I think that makes great sense as well. My fellow commissioners, are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Lichtenstein.
I just wanted to say, Ms. Strand, thank you for the overview, and I would be very interested in hearing future updates about whatever academic musings go on, particularly around public-private, partnerships, sponsorships, what have you. I think micromobility options have really paved the way, but there's so much more we could do in terms of equity and having control over really making sure that the folks who need these options have access, and not just those, myself included, who like to go for a joyride from time to time. So I look forward to kind of learning what you learn as you go down that road. Thank you.
Other comments from the commission? And I'll add on to what Commissioner Lichtenstein said. I look forward to staff being able to come back and discuss those options further. As someone who wasn't aware of the Nike partnership that was mentioned, or about public-private partnerships or nonprofit options, I wasn't aware there are other models. And I don't know what the pros and cons of each model are, but I'd be very interested in learning more about them. And it sounds like you'll be making a presentation to City Council in December about changes to the ordinance. And so conceivably that'll be before there'll be an opportunity to speak to the TMI Commission. So I'd like to make a motion that the staff include the comments that have been made in the conversation just now when the staff prepares the staff report for City Council, so that City Council is also aware of the thoughts of the TMI Commission.
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, we can't make a motion on a city report. It's not an agendized item. However, we can take your recommendations and incorporate comments at that time when we go to City Council. I do also want to note, as far as the city staff reports go, I do appreciate the commissioners being available for the special meeting that's been scheduled for December. I believe it's December 7th. We had 3 items that we were intending to bring to the commission, but unfortunately, we're not able to get them completed in time for this meeting. That included the green zones, the Green Means Go program through SACOG. We have applied for designated green zones throughout the city, which are locations that SACOG is asking the city to designate that could benefit from improved infrastructure vis-a-vis new development by putting in new road infrastructure or utility infrastructure. I'll be bringing that to the December meeting, even though that is going to follow the City Council meeting. Unfortunately, it just fell in between a window that we weren't able to get that. The other 2 are the I Street Bridge Deck Conversion for Active Transportation Project, cooperative agreement with the City of Sacramento, and the I Street Bridge Replacement Project, cooperative agreement with the City of Sacramento. Unfortunately, we were not able to come to an agreement with the City of Sacramento in time for this meeting. So we'll be taking that to the commission on December 7th.
Well, thank you, Mr. McCoy. Looking forward to that. And then thank you for correcting me. I was so engrossed and that was so informative. I forgot this was a staff report, not a agendized item, but looking forward to future conversations on that. As we're still on item 6B, are there any other reports from city staff?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, and in that case, I just wanted to follow up as well. In our last commission meeting, we had received a public comment about faded pedestrian safety markings, and I had requested just an update in terms of how city staff would respond and whether they've corrected that request. Is there anything you can provide?
I believe I provided an email update to all the commissioners. We had met with, well, we being the city of West Sacramento, the public works director was in contact with this resident along with our Vin K, our engineer here at the city, to discuss some of the issues that she had brought up. Our public works director actually met her out on site and walked the site to identify the locations. There were an extensive amount of locations that were reviewed. Not all of those could be done at one time. We do not have the budget to do that. But the ones that could be accomplished in a short period of time, we're taking care of. We still have to contract that we're going to be executing in order to get some of this other work done for striping. So that's supposed to be going in the future through the Public Works Department. And as you know, we have changed. We are no longer part of the Public Works Department. We are now Capital Projects and Transportation. So maintenance issues are no longer within our department, but they're handled through Public Works directly. So that actually went up the chain all the way through the city manager, who was also involved in the discussions, and everybody worked to make sure that the resident was responded to appropriately.
I appreciate that, Mr. McCoy. You know, I think as wonderful as streetcar and light rail and micromobility is, I think it's also important that the residents and my neighbors in West Sacramento continue to see that the streets are safe, and that if there's faded markings or signs that are misplaced, that those sort of bread and butter issues are able to be addressed. And so glad to hear that it sounds like the concerns in this case were. And in that case, item 6C on the agenda is future agenda item requests from the commission. Commissioners, are there any future agenda item requests? In that case, I know it's almost 8 o'clock, which this is probably one of the longer TMI meetings, but it's been very productive. Item 60 is adjournment, and I want to thank everyone for their time tonight and wish everyone well tomorrow. Even if you're not getting married tomorrow, it's going to be a big day. I will make a motion to adjourn and adjourn the TMI Commission meeting until our special meeting on December 7th. Thank you all.
Commissioner.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.